Welcome to today's webinar entitled 20 Years of Infield Synthetic Turf, What We've Learned. My name is Billy Zadig, Manager of Special Programs for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage under the Continuous Learning tab later today. Professional continuing education certificates are being offered for today's program. Those who indicated they wanted a certificate at registration and meet the requirements will receive certificates later this afternoon. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. Before we get started, I would like to give a brief introduction of our speaker today. Peter Spanos is a Senior Project Manager at Gale Associates Athletic Facilities Planning and Design Group. He has over 20 years of experience in the industry. With that brief intro, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Peter Spanos. Pete, take it away.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Peter Spanos, and I'm one of the senior project engineers with Gale Associates. Have been doing this for, as mentioned, for over 20 years. And today, it's all going to be about our experience with 20 years plus of synthetic turf fields and how the industry and the design methods have evolved and changed over time. So the slide here is a little bit about kind of the goals and what we're going to be discussing, how turf systems have been involved, the lessons we've learned, like I said, the risks or perceived risks with different types of synthetic turf and different types of infill that are on the market, and what the future is looking like. So this is going to be a quick background of the kind of the history of synthetic turf fields in the United States area. The genesis of this, the first generation is what we like to call, happened in the mid to late 60s. It was in the Houston Astrodome, and as people started to call it AstroTurf back in the day, it was comprised of very short nylon fibers. There was no type of infill in it, and it was just adhered to a type of either straight concrete or to a little carpet pad. As the generations and technology kind of progressed in the 70s, they moved toward more of a softer plastic, a polypropylene, if you will, and started including longer carpet fibers. That allowed them to put some sand infill in the ballast for playability and performance, and for other types of sports. The third generation was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it involved of a little bit even longer carpet fibers, around 2 to 2.5 inches was what they were using back then. It was a little bit softer plastic. Polyethylene is what's typically used today. It's the same or very similar to your typical water bottle. And they started introducing, in addition to just the sand infill, which served as the ballast or the weight, they started introducing SBR, which is the traditional black crumb rubber tire that comes from the recycled tire industry. It's the most prevalent, and I would say still among the most used today as a type of infill. As we moved on to the fourth and newer generations coming on the market, the whole synthetic turf system is tuned and designed nowadays for both performance in mind and safety considerations in mind. As you see here in the middle is just a typical graphic representation of a synthetic turf field. You have the carpet on top. You have the infill that's within between the carpet backing and the fibers themselves, different types of products, which I will get into. There's a resilient pad that can be used, and then there's the traditional stone base that provides the drainage for these systems. The turf fibers have evolved. So the turf fibers on the top right, the first one was the earlier generation, the slit film. It's the tried and true type of system. It is basically a film, a flat piece of tape, if you will, that then gets fibrulated and chopped up to become little different type of strands. The other type of turf fiber that's used there is the monofilament. It's a single extruded plastic fiber, and it has a built-in spine with it. If you were to look at it under a microscope, or if your eyes are still good, you can look at a top-down view and see how it's shaped a little bit more like a diamond, if you will, trying to represent more of a natural grass fiber. So the slit film, it tends to lay over a little bit more. It tends to have a faster play. The monofilament tends to stand up a little bit more. It helps with ball roll for soccer and things like that. And then the furthest carpet fiber to the right is the dual fiber. So you true multi-purpose municipal and high school and college turf fields. If they're a true multi-purpose, dual fiber is the way that most fields are getting constructed. You get a little bit of the best of both worlds from the slit film and from the monofilaments. Underneath that is different types of underlayments or shock pads that are on the market. They come in various compositions and materials with different performance standards associated with each one, and different warranties associated with each one. They're all free draining, and depending on what the purpose of your final synthetic turf system use will be, you can tune your fields to be in accordance with that. And then the turf infills are to the left. So the one at the bottom, the black SBR rubber, that's the tried and true and the traditional crumb rubber tire one. Then there's different versions of it. You have your natural or organic products that you see here. They could be a mixture of coconut husks. Some of them have cork in them, different types of natural fibers. There's different products that have shells coming from either walnut shells or even olive pits that are used. And there's different types of other wood products that come in from the bark of the trees. A certain type of pine that's being used. Then you have dead center is what we call the acrylic coated sands. Basically, they're a subangular rounded sand that's color coded with an acrylic surface that's used for the infill. Your TPEs are your thermoplastic elastomers. Those are extruded plastics. And then your EPDM, which is what we call in the industry the virgin rubber. It's typically what you see in playgrounds for the color coats and also on track and fields. Next slide here is basically the first one that we did was University of Massachusetts in Lowell. It was their athletic complex. It was the first installed in the New England area, and I think the first installed on the East Coast. At that time, there were maybe 2 or 3 other infilled synthetic turf fields in the United States, and it quickly grew from there. At the time, it was done for NCAA football, field hockey, and soccer. So the next slide is a continuation of that. It has gone through 3 turf cycles and now is entering its 4th replacement, and all used for different purposes. The first installation that we talked about, that was 1999-2000 timeframe, was the new on the market. It was a 2.5-inch pile height. It was a slit film fiber that had your traditional SBR rubber and sand infill. It was primarily used for football, soccer, and field hockey used it occasionally. In the early or the mid 2000s, it was replaced. The university no longer had football as their primary sport on that field, and it was replaced for a primary soccer and field hockey use. It still remains 2.5-inch pile height with sand and rubber. However, it was switched over from a slit film to a monofilament fiber for the performance qualities for soccer. And then in 2012, it was replaced again. This time, it was turned into a dedicated field hockey field. So the POW height was reduced to just 1/2 inch. The fiber was a nylon fiber, and infill was not used on this one. It was just a knitted nylon over a shock pad. So the next slide here is just a couple aerial shots showing as the field here changed, what it would look like under these different scenarios. So since then, the playing field has grown. More and more turf vendors and marketing manufacturers are in the market, I should say. So as of 2022, there were well over 40 brands of infill manufacturers of synthetic turf on the market. These here are just some of them. There are a slew of them, and each one, depending on the needs and the specifications written for your project and for the performance requirements, different vendors can meet or cannot meet. And there's just a whole slew of them. You don't have to sit there and choose one. There are more than one that can achieve your goal. This is just a typical cross section for a synthetic turf field, right? When one gets built, I'll show you some photos coming up of you. If it's a natural grass conversion to synthetic turf, you are, removing the full topsoil layer and full depth of that media and shaping it, putting in under drainage and bringing back free draining stone and then the carpet, right? So the top section here is your traditional crowned field. It's crowned down the middle and it slopes to each sideline, if you will. For a synthetic turf field, you no longer are required to slope it to the same pitch or degree as a natural grass. For a natural grass field to drain properly, it needs to be anywhere between 1% and 2% cross slope. 2% being the extreme if you do not have very if you have very free draining soils. You also want to include an under drain system on a natural grass field. So the similar properties are introduced here for synthetic turf. Again, the gold standard for synthetic turf field is to mimic as closely as possible a very well-maintained, pristine natural grass field. So to do that with synthetic turf, you construct it like this. You remove all the in situ soil to the depth you need. You rough grade it to 0.5%. You introduce your free draining stone. If you're familiar with the aggregate sizes with ASTM, you're doing a 57 stone, if you will, and then you're topping it off with a finished stone layer or a choker stone layer of about 1 inch, usually around the 89 stone level. That helps you able to laser grade this at 0.5%, and then you introduce the carpet system pad and infill on top of it. Down the sidelines, if you will, you install header pipes, which are perforated pipes in stone, and then in the middle of the field, spaced depending on the drainage capabilities of your field, either spaced every 20 feet on center to every 40 feet on center, or finger drains, lateral drains is what they're called, that connect into your header pipes. The bottom representation here is if you were, depending on your site constraints and your conditions, you can slope your field from sideline to sideline and not have a crown to it. And this is what it would look like under that scenario. So typical construction sequence for a new field, as I briefly mentioned before, the site gets the entire topsoil and full depth stratum gets removed. You start rough grading it to the desired elevation and desired slope. you start bringing in your, as you see here in the middle, the top middle, your geotextile fabric. You start rolling that out. That serves the purpose of separating the aggregate layer of your stone base with the in situ soil material, and also separates the fines being introduced and into the free draining stone that you have there. Once that gets down, you start rolling out at the same time your perimeter drainage and your flat panel finger drains, and then start moving the stone as you work your way from one side to the other. Once that is all done, you finish and laser grade your field, drop the carpet down, the pad, if you're using a pad, drop the carpet down, put the infill, and finish the field. So here is a photo. If you fast forward at the end of its useful life, you're basically doing the same thing, but in reverse, depending on where it is. If you're the top left is if it's within a running track, you would have to protect the track. During the scenario, you remove the carpet. They have machines now that can cut out the carpet in swaths, and it goes through a conveyor belt, if you will, and shakes out the sand and the different type of infill material. Gets shaken out of the carpet. It gets put into super sacks, and what's left behind is a carpet that's void of the infill, so it's easier to handle, lighter in weight. It gets rolled up and it gets disposed of depending on what is the end use of it, whether it's going to get recycled, go to a landfill, or being repurposed for something else. The existing stone that you have there now should be good enough to go for the second cycle of synthetic turf. However, it should be evaluated before the new carpet gets put down. By doing that, you do some infiltration testing, and you also check the planarity of it. If you notice that the infiltration testing is not toward or up to what was originally done or what the performance specifications were for that field, this is your opportunity to make some stone amendments, whether you re-scarify it, blend it with some more free and draining stone. There are some other scenarios where the top layer of stone has been removed and replaced with brand new stone altogether, and then retested. Once that stone is meeting the drainage requirements that are preferred, you start introducing, whether if it's a shock pad, that's when you introduce your shock pad and move your way down with the installation of the turf. And then as the turf is sewn in afterwards, you cut in your any type of permanent lines and markings you need to do, logos, whatnot, and then putting in your final grooming with the infill of the desired infill to meet the performance requirements of your facility. So these are some of the advertised synthetic turf advantages. I will get into this in a few more slides. So it's low maintenance. I don't want to say no maintenance, because there's still maintenance required for a synthetic turf field, right? You have to maintain a synthetic turf field to make it last as long as you want to make it last. This is a huge investment, and if you don't keep an eye on your turf field and maintain areas that get displaced, areas around the lacrosse goals and between the hash marks of football, around the soccer goals, those areas need to get maintained a little bit more. If you do not do that and allow infill displacement, you are making your fields wear prematurely, and you're not really getting the full use of these facilities. Overall lifetime costs, though, per use are lower when compared to a well-maintained natural grass field. Here you also have permanent lines and markings. You put those in, you don't have to worry about restriping them before each game. Nearly all weather use, if short of having anything with lightnings or any hurricane level winds, you can pretty much play on these things through the rain and whatnot. People even play with them after a snow event. The performance, you're trying to make it look as close to natural grass as possible. high utilization. So these things do not wear down as fast as natural grass. You're not killing the root zone. So you can use synthetic turf fields, 3 times, sometimes even up to 4 times more, depending if you have athletic lights for night use, than you would be able to do a natural grass field. Synthetic turf fields don't care how many people get on it, how often they get on it, as long as you can schedule the time for it. Okay, and also there's an immediate availability. Natural grass field, even if it's sodded, you can't play on it right away. There's still a growing period. You have to look at it. You have to inspect it to see if the root zones have taken hold and whatnot. With the synthetic turf field, as soon as it gets laid down and stitched up and passes the performance testing, it's ready to go. It's immediate use. So what you see here is just a screen grab and an example of some advantages versus grass that we've seen. Again, this is all variable as well. It all depends on your maintenance and capabilities and your maintenance funding and what you typically would do for a natural grass field. But on average, it's around $29,000 a year to maintain a natural grass field. With a synthetic turf, depending on how many uses and what the specific sport is and your routine grooming, roughly it's on average of $4,000 to $7,000 a year. So you are saving some fundings. There's still maintenance requirements, but you're not spending the monies and the maintenance and the manpower to do your mowing, the irrigation needs, fertilizing, aerating, resting, all the above. So touch base a little bit on turf disposal. So turf disposal has been growing because more and more of these, since they were first introduced in the early 2000s, more and more of these are getting replaced. And what do we do with the existing carpet that's getting replaced, right? It used to be just drop it off at a landfill and call it a day. However, with the costs, more and more landfills in the United States are closing, and disposal costs are continuing to rise, and so that has generated alternative recycling opportunities and purposes have been introduced. Infill recycling, you can look at doing that, and turf recycling, and I'll touch base on that on the next slide. So, the two components obviously with the turf is the infill material that you have there, and then the carpet itself. The carpet itself, the ideal way of recycling would be cradle to cradle, which means the carpet would get all chopped up and repurposed and made into new carpet fibers for the new synthetic turf field. That is an emerging market. It's still not prevalent. There are a few places in the United States that can handle that. More and more are popping up as the years go on. Some other areas that can be used is the carpet can get repurposed for another type of material, more of a composite material for landscaping, things like that, and have different uses. It's still being recycled, but being recycled as a different product instead of just coming back as another synthetic turf carpet fiber. And then the infill itself, depending on what it is, it can be used for different areas. It can, if it's still a certain type and good material, it can be reused for the second go around or supplemented with the second go around of the turf field, or it can be used for landscaping, mulching beds, things like that, depending if it's natural or not. Oh, sorry, skipped over it. Here is the infill that I was talking about. So your organic or natural products, they can be used for mulch or soil amendments. So synthetic turf itself, when the infill, whether it's a natural or organic product, when it's in the synthetic turf field carpet itself, it's mainly a sterile environment. It's very free draining. It gets beat up by the sun and UV light. there's not a lot of microbes that can live in that type of environment, and the microbes is what breaks down a natural or organic infill, right? So, however, when you replace the carpet, you can use the infill that's in there, and if you introduce it into a soil amendment or a planting bed or a landscape application, you're introducing it to an environment that's high in microbes. And what we've noticed is those products, natural organic products, will start to completely break down, turn black, and completely break down within weeks of being introduced to that type of environment. Crumb rubber and sand and coated sand, those can be redone and repurposed or even reused for the next infill. We always recommend evaluating what the condition quality is of the crumb rubber or the coated sand or the sand ballast that you're looking at. It might be in such a condition where it's oxidized or broken down or become too brittle and not resilient enough, and you may need to replace it all in kind, or it might be a way where you can put it in and then just supplement it with additional top dress material. Similar situation for the EPDM, which is the virgin rubber, and the TPE, which is the thermoplastic extruded. This is just a slide I talked before about what the carpet can be used for. So the goal, ideally to be considered, a cradle to cradle type of product, is for it to be recycled and reused again as a polyethylene carpet fiber. However, that's an emerging market. There's more popping up every year, like I said, and other abilities is to chop it up, pelletize it, and use it for different types of products. What you see here in the bottom right is it's being used as for landscaping purposes and planting beds. What you see in the top right is it's being used as a composite nailer board that's being used on the concrete anchor curb. It can be used for that scenario here, and then the carpet itself is anchored to the top of it, so it serves a purpose there. Here is just an example of one of the earlier facilities. This one, it was replaced after 13 years of use. The infill itself was SBR rubber and sand. The carpet itself was reused for some of the local batting cages and bullpens. The infill was evaluated and was still in good condition, good quality, and was reused for a certain amount to replace the infill for the new carpet. However, it was still top dressed with new rubber on top. So what we find is, after your evaluation, some of this infill product may be a little bit dusty, maybe a little bit dirty. It's kind of an acceptance, kind of evaluating, seeing what's going on. If you were to reuse the existing infill on a brand new carpet, you may get some initial trapped in small little plastic fibers or some dust or some other debris, and it may not look as pristine on day one. After it gets worked in and groomed and has some rain events on it, it'll look brand new. But sometimes in the beginning, some of the complaints that we've had from just the users, it doesn't look as brand new as it should be. A way to get around that is, if you're still going to use the existing infill to save some money, you would top dress it with some brand new infill from day one. So these are some of the lessons learned. So what you have here is, there's, with Gill Associates, we're getting close to 300 synthetic turf fields now, over 23,000 million square feet of turf, right? So throughout all those fields, there is no cookie cutter solution, right? Everyone is different. Everyone serves a different purpose. Laser grading specifications, they've gotten better over time, as our as these turf fields get more and more installed, our construction methods are evolving, and so are the designers' specifications for the project, and design specifications and details evolving. So laser grading is key. The turf base stone, the material and the aggregate size of the turf base stone specifications have continued to evolve. More and more of them, you are looking for stone that is similar to like a 57 stone for your base stone, but the key to that is the lower sieves, like a 200 sieve, which really is the fines. You want to pick a specification or pick an aggregate material that's in there where you have less than 2% of your 200 sieve. We found in areas where these things fail or drain slow or have issues with drainage, and we do some testing, we find that the fines in the 200 sieve, if you will, are higher than 2%. So that's kind of your sweet spot. You want to be 2% or under for that type of scenario. Seaming techniques, glue versus stitch. Either is acceptable depending on the type of manufacturer and the type of installer that's being used. The key takeaway here is if it is glued, you want to make sure that they're using an adhesive that's specifically made for outdoor synthetic turf field applications, not just a regular indoor carpet adhesive that's being used on your synthetic turf field outside. Curbing construction details. The curbing, whether it's concrete with a built-in notch to it, as you see here in the bottom right, where the carpet can get adhered to, or just a standard concrete curb with a nailer board to it. Just different details associated with that. More and more curbs now are being introduced with some saw cut lines, especially if they have perimeter fencing associated with that. The saw cut lines are basically your construction joints, like on a sidewalk. You're telling it where to crack, so you want to manage where these concrete curbs are going to be cracking. Shock attenuation and planning for end-of-life replacement. Many owners, know that they have to pay the money up front to get the synthetic turf field, and depending on where you are and what region of the country you're in, your field is going to last or break down quicker. It also depends on how much maintenance you do, but ideally, the manufacturing industry and the synthetic turf companies have a standard, typical 8-year warranty on these things. Some products are tested a little bit higher, so they can go up to 10 years, but ideally that's all you're going to get. But the built-in properties of this latest generation synthetic turf fields with the UV inhibitors that are put in there, and the shape of the fibers now are projected to last longer, and we anticipate these turf fields lasting, well over 8 years, closer to 12 years, if you will. Some going a little bit more, some going a little bit less. Again, depending on what region of the country you are in and what your maintenance practices and the amount of use it gets. So the owner should always plan on the end of the turf life replacement. The good news is that if you're putting a shock pad in there, the latest shock pads have warranties that are 20, 25 years, so they're handling a second replacement. And so what you're doing at the time of your carpet replacement is the infrastructure, the drainage, the stone, the shock pad, that's all staying, and you're just replacing the carpet and the infill itself. And then maintenance, that's most important. And then having attic stock of turf and infill. That's always a good idea. If you have some issues in the future with a different type of line striping for a specific sport, or some lettering issues, logo issues, whatnot, and they have to bring in a different type of carpet or a different type of fiber to make that repair, well, you have a field in there that's been in there, let's say 5, 6, 7 years. It's been aging the whole time, and any type of repair job you do will stick out like a sore thumb. It will be a patch. A good idea from the beginning is to include, as part of the project, attic stock of carpet, the green standard carpet that you're using on the field, the colors that you're using on the field, and the infill. That way, turf manufacturer can go in there and make the repairs and use the same type of material, the same type of colors, because you know the blue that was made for your turf field 8 years ago is not going to match a new color blue that was dropped on the site today to make that repair. Observations, as I touched base before, if your facility is if you're constructing it for a true multi-purpose to do a whole slew of sports on it, you know, football, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, dual fiber is the way to go. I would say 80% of the projects that we do for multi-purpose fields nowadays are dual fiber. The sand, the pile height, the infill, that all gets tuned to the specific type of sports, whether you want it to be faster, more performance for ball roll and things like that. Third-party warranties, it's always a good idea to, in addition to the synthetic turf manufacturer's 8-year warranty, it's always good to have a third-party warranty just to cover your bases in case for some slim chance that the manufacturer is not there. 8 years from now or within the warranty period, you would have the opportunity to be able to cover yourself for some of the repairs or replacements. Controlling the fines, that's what I talked about before. The fines is usually what I call the 200 sieve in the gradation of the aggregate. You want to make sure you have it as low as possible. You put in the specifications, it goes through the submittal process that way too. I would always recommend when the stone gets dropped on site, grab samples, get taken from there, and third-party testing of what is actually dropped on your site as well, just to make sure. The clay pitcher's mound, that's mainly for areas that are synthetic turf fields or synthetic turf infields for baseball purposes. Sure, you can always have baseball permanent mounds with synthetic turf on them. They look great and they're you know, set it and forget it. However, because of the inherent properties of your pitcher's mound and the slope that it has, you are if you do that type of approach, you have to take into account that that is a very high wear area, and the mound turf surfacing infill will be displaced on a much regular basis more often, and that is the area that's going to be wearing down and require multiple patches throughout the life of your synthetic turf carpet. For those type of scenarios, sometimes we recommend going with a traditional clay mound for baseball. That way you can always shape it the way you want, and the rest of the infield is synthetic turf. And then paved entryways, if you don't have a good idea is to try to direct how people enter and leave these synthetic turf fields, right? You don't want them just to be running around during and after a rain event, practicing kicking the ball around or whatever in the soupy and muddy grass next to the synthetic turf field, and then dragging on all that mud and whatnot onto your synthetic turf fields. It'll stain them. It won't make them look aesthetically, but more importantly, over time, those fines and silt that's being introduced will choke up the back of the carpet, and you might end up with some ponding areas in your synthetic turf field, some slow draining areas. So it's a good idea to have a perimeter fence around it and have some paved areas that direct people how they enter and leave the fields. This is performance testing. So performance testing is key to make sure that you get what you want for the specific type of sports and what's out there. The traditional testing that most people are aware of is the GMAX testing, which is the top left. That is an ASTM standard. It's been around since the early generations of synthetic turf. It is a requirement that comes from actually the automotive industry, from like crash test dummies. That's kind of its genesis there, but it measures the attenuation of the shock, and it's primarily used or more for lower body extremities. The other type of test you see here is the HIC, or the head impact head injury criteria. This uses more of a, instead of a flat cylinder missile that you see there, dropped at prescribed height with GMAX. The HIC test is a hemispherical missile, tries more to simulate the a head impact. It's also used in the playground industry for the same purposes, and you drop it from a prescribed height and measure the critical fall height is what they call. It's readily used in areas of international play, rugby, FIFA, things like that. The one turf method is what they call it. It's a good idea to incorporate that into your testing parameters. And both these tests, the GMAX and the HIC, we recommend those should be done on an annual basis with your field. That way, you have a good sense of knowing when you have an issue. You don't want to test this on year 6 or 7 and find out you have an issue and then scrambling to make repairs or adjustments to your facility. It's as if you do this on a yearly basis, these things don't just happen. They creep up on you over time, so you can see, hey, some of this testing raised a little bit from years 2 to 3, years 4 to 5. Maybe we should start implementing some mitigation. Infill measurement. It's short money on this gauge. So you can find it anywhere from $3 to $20, depending on what you want. It basically measures the infill depth. So infill depth is one of the key factors. The more infill you have, the lower number you're going to get on GMAX and HIC. They're a direct correlation. The rule of thumb is to have about half an inch of exposed blades, carpet fiber. So, for example, a 2-inch carpet would have 1.5 inches of infill. A 2.5-inch carpet would have 2 inches of infill. If you readily measure your infill and it's within these parameters or what it's supposed to be, you're doing the first and one of the most important steps in maintaining your field. The way these things fail is areas get displaced, especially in front of the goal areas, high use areas. If you don't have enough infill to support your fibers, you're exposing more and more of the carpet blade itself. It's laying down more, which means more of its surface area is being exposed to the sun and UV light. And that's the way these things degrade. It's the same as if you left a water bottle on the beach for 8 years, it'll become degraded and brittle and break up on you. Similar thing here with the carpet. They will continue to break down due to UV light. And also, if you're exposing more and more of the carpet backing, the players' footwear and cleats will get more into the backing and tear up your fields. Temperature mitigation, that's just double checking. That all depends on type of infill as well. But keeping an eye on temperature, these fields do play hot, and that's something to be aware of. Then you have ball roll on the bottom area of it, surface planarity testing, vertical deformation that gives you more of the performance and the torsion properties of the surface itself, and then drainage properties. So the next slide here, these are the tests, and this is what's done to a field before you put the carpet down, right? So before you put the shock pad and the synthetic turf and the infill down, obviously we talked about it before, you make sure you laser grade it. Recommended planarity is 0.5%. You do your infiltration testing on it. This is one of the dual ring infiltrometer testing that's been done on it. Make sure that the drainage stone is draining the way it's supposed to drain. If you have very slow draining stone, or they used an aggregate, a choker layer that had too many fines on it or was over compacted, and you don't do this type of test before the carpet goes down, it's very difficult to fix this. If it's a direct issue with the underlying stone, you have to remove the carpet and make these corrections. And then what you see here on the right is the planarity test. That's basically a 10-foot straight edge, if you will, and you have a graduated measuring device, like shaped like a wedge, and you just drag this thing all up and down the entire synthetic turf field after it's been laser graded. You measure where the gaps are, and you measure the depth of the gaps. If it exceeds the planarity within the test, that's when you make the repairs. Then it's a lot easier to make the repairs now, and then put the pad and carpet down. If you don't do that, and after the field is finished and the players are playing and they feel some slight underfoot depressions, and if those depressions are a result of the stone itself being displaced a little bit during installation, it's very hard to get rid of those. You can try to roll them out, you can try to do different methods, you might end up cutting them out, but it's very difficult. This here is just a large review just to give you the scale of what that planarity test is. That poor guy and the guy behind him with the measuring device, they just go back and forth throughout the entire footprint of the field, and they measure areas that are out of compliance. They spray paint them, and then the contractor comes back and makes those repairs, check it again, and then it gets blessed and the carpet gets put down. This is just a scenario here. You know, you always get asked the question of does turf extend the playing season? Is it as an all-weather surface? And the answer is yes. It doesn't care what the weather is, what the amount is, as long as you're not having any type of issues with driving winds or lightning delays. You can play on this. This is just a version of lacrosse for a college in the northern areas. Lacrosse is a spring sport. Lacrosse players are chomping at the bit as early as, you know, February and whatnot to get on the field and start practicing. You know, usually you have snow on it, so in those regions. So these synthetic turf fields, they can get plowed. They can per the manufacturer's recommendations. The heat gain you'll get a little bit from the sun, from the exposed grass fiber, will help melt the rest of the carpet, of the snow on the carpet. And then you see here the next day they were playing lacrosse on it, no problem. This is just infilled carpets. What I touched base before, the latest generation, they're expected to last 10 to 14 years. This is very heavily dependent too on the owner's maintenance practices, right? This is just an example from the UMass Lowell one, how many sports were able to play on it, how many hours a day throughout its life expectancy that we saw the first time around and the second time around. So some of the risks, I'm just going to quickly go through these. Some of the risks are perceived. Some of them may be depending on what type of study and what the purpose was, and we'll go from there. So injuries, you know, you're still trying to reduce the injury of synthetic turf versus grass, right? By putting in a shock pad itself and making sure, well, first off, I'm making sure the planarity is right and you're not having any of these depressions. You're reducing the occurrence of lower extremity, ankle injuries, things like that. With a synthetic turf field, if you were to couple that with putting some type of shock pad on it, you're reducing the occurrence of concussions and lower extremity injuries. You're not going to stop your helmet-to-helmet concussion, right? That's still going to happen if that's the case. What you're trying to do is you're trying to lessen the occurrence of having the head impact from the ground surface and things like that. Crumb rubber itself, again, since it's one of the earliest generations of turf, it's still used in about 60% of the field installed in 2022 in recent years. It's still out there and it's still being used. It's one of the most studied infills that are on the market. There's different types of characterizations, the chemicals that are in it, the emission testing, bioaccessibility. This is just a brief overview of it. From the testing that's been reported to date, the range of chemicals that are in there are in the vulcanization process, they are not leached out as you would think they were. They are in the material itself. So the air emissions and the bioaccessibility of these metals and other components and the bacteria levels are all low or below the reported standards. One of the other things that's coming more and more, you might be hearing more about it, is PFAS. PFAS, there's very different, there's a slew, hundreds and hundreds of types of compounds that are kind of put into the same umbrella. The ones that have been banned from use, and some of the ones you hear on the radio, like firefighting foam and things of that nature, that is what's have been tested to be detrimental to human and to wildlife. The ones that are the others that are being used in the market, you see here is this slide and some graphics here showing how truly ubiquitous PFAS is. It's readily found on everything, even rainwater has it, different types and different compounds. So the thing to keep in mind is it's the PFAS that are of concern. They're not what's being used as part of the material itself. Different types of compounds are being used. The levels that are reported when these carpets get tested are below the background and recordable limits typically. The fibers themselves use a different type of processing aid. It's not the PFAS that is you've been seeing on the news. It's a type of product that's readily used, the same as medical devices and surgical sutures, things like that. So I'll touch base briefly on some good maintenance practices. With a synthetic turf field, you should have included in your procurement grooming and maintenance equipment that can get dragged behind the machinery you have on your site. So the bottom right is the one I keep alluding to. It's the least expensive. It's the infill depth gauge. You should be using that on a weekly basis. Everywhere on the field, just making sure you have enough infill there. You may need to do some spot grooming. You may need to just add some additional infill, but you should always, you know what your carpet height is, you know what the infill level should be. It's very easy to just drop down to one knee and take 3 seconds of your time to measure this infill and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So what you see at the bottom left is your typical groomer. It's a bunch of bristles, and you drag it behind a gator or Kubota or whatnot, and it helps kind of decompact a little bit and scarify and fluff up the infill and the carpet fibers. That is done typically depending on your use and depending on how many people, how many events you have and what you have going on there. That can be used on a weekly basis, every 2 weeks, on a monthly basis. It all depends on what you see and how you're monitoring your field. The top left photo is some additional attachments that you do. The larger one in green is what they call the sweeper. In addition to grooming it and decompacting and fluffing up the bristles in the infill, the sweeper picks up any type of litter, debris, gum wrappers, leaf debris, things like that, right? So that get picked up by that. And then it's a little bit more difficult to see, but it's by the aluminum seats there. It's a magnet attachment. So you drag the magnet attachment as well. You don't have to do it as often, but you can do it on a monthly basis. And that helps pick up obviously any type of metal. For women's sports, there's always a slew of bobby pins from the hair on these fields, and you'd be surprised by running this one time how many you'll pick up. And then the top right one is a deep grooming machine. It is typically, we don't usually recommend it because of its cost for the owner to purchase. However, there are a whole slew of turf grooming companies and out there. that you can engage and get under contract with, and they can come do this on a yearly basis or every 2 years. It's a good practice to do that. What you have here is some temperature considerations. So in addition with what it looks like, depending on what region you are, obviously the farther south and southwest you go, heat gain is a big concern. These things do run hot. There's no way around them. Here's a slide of recently installed fields that was around the track. The track hadn't been surfaced yet, and what you saw here on an 80-degree sunny day, the asphalt surface was running around 105. The concrete perimeter anchor curb, because it's lighter in color, was in the 90s, and the synthetic turf with crumb rubber was 139. These things, if it's traditional crumb rubber, they can get as hot as 160, 165 in that range. The good news is that this is under direct sunlight. The heat gain is there. However, when the sun gets, when clouds come back and the sun comes back, gets out of the way, these temperatures drop down dramatically. If you get a rain event that happens, these things, the evapotranspiration properties of it drop down as well. So what are some of the ways to manage it? Well, obviously the easiest one is to try to restrict the use of your fields. You know, you don't want to have, if you're in the South or having summer camps or whatnot, you don't want to have games happening, between, 2:30 and 5 o'clock, right, or 4:30. You want to monitor what they have a good monitoring program, make sure everybody's hydrated, some shade structures, everything you can to try to limit the use during the high heat time of day. You can install some type of irrigation systems. Again, irrigation systems you are just coating it with water to facilitate some evapotranspiration cooling properties. You are not inundating and soaking it like you were doing a natural grass field. So the amount of water use is very minimal. And then there's different types of alternative infills that are used. Here is that have hydrophilic properties that hold on to water to make them cool quicker. This is just a slew of irrigation methods. What you have on the top left is an actual water wheel. It's been used for agriculture purposes for years, and natural grass fields, you roll it down the middle, and then on itself it kind of retracts down the middle of the field. This is tried and true. It works. However, it can take several hours to finish as it's rolling itself back up. You have your built-in irrigation sprinkler heads that are very quick and can cover the field in a short amount of time. And then on the bottom right, you have some built-in quick connects where you, at certain locations, where you can go in there, you could connect your irrigation methods or a hose to do some spot cooling of the areas. What you see here is a recently installed field down south in the Florida area, where they used an organic natural type of infill, and they coupled it with this high-end irrigation system. As you can see, the spray and the throw of this, it's able to get well past 200 feet in range, and this type of irrigation system is able to get the field wet for the cooling properties in under 20 minutes. So it's a big deal. They can do it before their varsity game, and then the field itself performs as it should. All right, so I'm getting close to wrapping up here. I'm right on time, I believe. So next 10 years, the fiber, right? The fiber is continuing to evolve. They're trying to make it last longer, and longer, so it doesn't break down enough as much, and you can get hopefully a longer warranty period and longer use, because this is a huge investment. Coupled with the fiber is the UV stability and the polymers used for it. Alternative infills, there's a slew of them on the market. There's 3 or 4 new infills on the market each year. Advancements in heat management, that's the next thing. In addition, with environmental considerations of the type of infill, there's the heat and heat gain on these carpets. And then the recycling market, that's becoming more and more prevalent, and more facilities are coming online and so you're not really just dumping them on the landfill as you used to back in the day. And more improvements in fields as they are. So with that said, that concludes the seminar and the webinar, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, we have time for about one question, and we have several in the, that's okay, we have several in the queue, so as I let everybody know, you will be answering their questions in a separate email.
Sure.
So let's just do one. What is the typical lifespan of a well-maintained turf field?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I helped answer that a little bit earlier on. So there's a lot of variables, one being the maintenance, obviously, of it, but a synthetic turf field with the newest generation of turf should be lasting you anywhere from 10 to 13 years. That's the projected. The warranties themselves still range between 8 and 10, but a well-maintained field should be lasting you 10 to 13 years.
Okay. And another question we have, we'll do it real quickly. What about cleaning the turf after heavy usage? Sweat, athletes, spitting, etc.
Yes, so a lot of that, you have the advantage of being outside. So the synthetic turf field that's outdoors gets sanitized the same way as your natural grass field, using just the natural elements and the sun and the UV light. That's the greatest sanitizer, right? If for an indoor application, you would have to use different products that are in there, just like you would be doing wrestling mats or some other products in the gym that would help you sanitize it, because you're not exposing the carpet itself to the UV light like you would outdoors.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Peter, thank you so much for this very informative webinar today. I'm getting lots of requests for your slides, so if you can see that I get those as you have time to send them to me. Other than that, I would like to say thank you to our attendees, as always, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. So until next time, have a wonderful holiday weekend, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.